Before I even get into this video, I want to say this. Black Lives Matter, and it's so incredibly important for all of us, but especially for privileged white people like myself to use whatever platforms we have, no matter how small they may be, to speak out on things like this, because our silence is compliance, and nothing can be accomplished without a fight. In the description of this video, I've linked a number of resources, including donation links, petitions to sign, and articles you can read. And I very strongly encourage you to look into everything that you possibly can so that you can be as educated as humanly possible about things like this. Again, Black Lives Matter. No justice, no peace.
Hi, my name is Levi. I am just shy of 20 years old and I have autism spectrum disorder. I was not diagnosed until I was 18 years old, so almost 2 years ago, and I've been wanting to make a video for a while talking about growing up not having that diagnosis, growing up completely unaware that that was even a possibility for me, and kind of my journey through getting diagnosed and how it's changed my life since. So if you're interested in hearing about that, keep watching. So, like I said, I'm just shy of 20 years old. I was born on June 16th, 2000, so my birthday is in a few days. And for the most part, I had a fairly typical childhood. Nothing really stood out developmentally. I was fairly on time with all of my developmental milestones, like talking and walking and all of that. I didn't show any regression in those areas, except for I took my first steps when I was 1, and I took 17 steps, and then I completely stopped walking for an entire month before I started again. That's not super significant, but it's something. Then in kindergarten, I needed a little bit of occupational therapy because my fine motor skills were not up to the level where they should be. So I was having a lot of trouble with holding a pencil properly, and I just completely could not cut with scissors. And even to this day, I honestly can't cut very well with scissors. I really just can't cut a straight line with scissors, or any shape for that matter. So my fine motor skills are still not great, but the OT was only really in kindergarten. And then in 3rd grade, the speech therapist at my elementary school spoke to my mom because she was concerned with the way I was pronouncing my S's and my Z's. And so I ended up in speech therapy between 3rd grade and 5th grade. And to be completely honest with you, didn't help. I have a lisp, as you can probably tell. Honestly, it became more prevalent in speech therapy because I have always been the type of person who, if you tell me to do something, I will do the exact opposite. So I would purposely exaggerate how bad I was saying my S's and Z's in speech therapy, kind of just to piss off the speech therapist in a way. And then I kind of got stuck with it, and I can't really stop anymore. So that's great. But besides that, throughout grade school, I was kind of considered one of the gifted kids. In elementary school, I was reading at a college grade level. And in middle school, I was taking all the advanced math courses, like high school math courses. My teachers used to call me Speedy Gonzalez because I would finish all my tests super fast, be the first one to turn them in every time. And I was also that kid that would never study but still get 100% on everything. Doesn't really work for me anymore, but I'm kind of burnt out at this point, so that's cool. In middle school, I started to struggle a lot with my mental health. I started to really realize how different I was than a lot of the other kids I was seeing. And I started to realize that I really had no idea how to interact with the other kids at school. Or I used to be a gymnast, so I didn't know how to interact with the other girls on my team, or coaches or teachers or whoever. And middle school was when that started to really hit for me, and so that's when my mental health really took a toll. I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety. And then at some point in high school, I was diagnosed with ADHD, which I find really interesting. I understand now that it's common for a lot of girls with autism to first be diagnosed with that. It's actually a very common misdiagnosis for people with autism, specifically girls with autism. That's honestly a whole nother video. I could go on and on about that subject, but yeah. Anyways, outside of school, in my childhood, I had some other specific issues, I guess, that were just kind of equated to anxiety. I've always been a very anxious person, or they'd be equated to me just being, quirky or unique or difficult, whatever word you may choose. So I've always had a really big aversion to physical touch. I've never really let my parents or other family members hug me, or I don't react well to people touching me if I don't know them, or if I'm not comfortable with them. I have to be really close with you to feel comfortable with you touching me or being in close proximity to me. I've always been a super picky eater. I eat the same things over and over again. It's now what I know is called safe foods. I'll go through phases where I will literally eat the same 3 foods over and over again for a couple weeks, and then move on to a different 3 foods, and then go back to the original 3 foods. It's kind of always been that way. When I was 3, I actually went through a phase where I would only wear long sleeves and long pants, and only wear the color red. I refused to wear anything else, even in the summertime. So in 90-degree weather Nebraska, that didn't really go well. I've always had a ton of sensory issues. I'm filming this at a window, and the natural light is coming in, and my eyes are not completely open. Light has always been a huge issue for me. I don't really have an issue with loud noises, but I have an issue with a bunch of loud noises kind of doggy piling onto each other. Kind of the chaos of people talking over each other. I can't focus on one specific voice. So if kids are to talk over the teacher in class, that's always been a problem for me. Certain textures, certain smells, certain foods. And I also really just crave structure and routine. Any last minute schedule changes really throw me off, and when I was younger, they would throw me into a full meltdown. I just can't handle it. I need to know what we're doing and where we're going. If you tell me we're going to the store at 11 o'clock and it's 11:02 and we haven't left yet, I'm going to freak out because we said 11 o'clock, and so I was ready for 11 o'clock. The only other thing I can think of really is eye contact. As you can tell, I've been staring at my neighbor's window kind of this whole time rather than the camera. I just don't like looking people in the eye. It's very uncomfortable for me. Fast forwarding a little bit to my senior year of high school, I was really into the show Parenthood. But one day I was sitting in the living room just, watching episodes of the show over and over again. And my mom decided to join me. And the episode that I was watching was specifically focused on a character named Max, who has what was previously called Asperger's, which is now just known as autism level 1, though I'm not a huge fan of functioning labels and levels and all of that. Again, another video. But as we were watching the show, my mom all of a sudden turned to me and she was like, "Hey, do you ever see the similarities between you and him? Do you ever think that you're kind of like him?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she's like, "Well, have you ever thought that you might have Asperger's?" And I was like, "Huh." no. I just kind of shook it off because I was like, you know, why would that occur to me? I think we all kind of have this idea in our heads of what autism is. There's just a lot of stigma surrounding it, and in my mind, I didn't fit that. And you know, I would have assumed that I would have got diagnosed earlier on in life because a lot of people do. And so I was like, no, definitely not. But it kind of stuck with me. And so later on, I decided to do some research of my own to look up, you know, different traits of people with autism and how to go about getting diagnosed and all of these things. So after a couple nights staying up and, you know, doing my research or whatever, I asked my mom if there was a way that we could look into myself getting diagnosed. Because I think at this point I just wanted to know one way or another. The idea was kind of put in my head and I was like, I could see it, potentially, but also maybe not. So I just kind of wanted to, you know, confirm or deny, I guess. So on June 28th of 2018, we went to a psychologist for an initial evaluation. And that day was just kind of me and my parents sitting down with the psychologist, and she asked us a lot of questions about like my mom's pregnancy with me, my childhood, my development, my behavior, different things that I do, you know, just kind of like a get to know me session. At the end of the session, she gave my parents some paperwork. There's a lot of it. And it had a bunch of additional questions that they were supposed to answer about me and bring back the next time that we went in. So fast forward a couple weeks later to July 19th, 2018. That was the official testing day. So I did 3 different tests. I did the ADOS-2, which is the Autism Diagnostic Observation Schedule. I did the BASC-3, which is the Behavior Assessment System for Children, and then I also did an IQ test. I didn't care for that. I was in a room alone with the psychologist for a couple hours, and she just had me do a bunch of different tasks while she was observing like my facial expressions, my gestures, the way I was speaking, the volume at which I was speaking, and the words I was using, and just overall the way I was interacting with her and the way I was interpreting her interaction with me. I had to do a lot of math problems. She asked me to define some vocabulary words. She tested my short-term memory. I had to fit little blocks together, kind of like a puzzle, to see, I think, how quickly I could do it, and if I could do it at all. I remember there were a few at the end that I couldn't figure out. She was asking me about different interests of mine and having me talk about them. I now know those are called special interests. Again, whole separate topic. After all the testing, she told us that she would get back to us in a couple weeks to let us know the results, I guess. With my first year of college starting that fall, it was a little tricky to schedule in another appointment, and so I didn't end up going back to the psychologist until September 25th of 2018, and that was the day that I was formally diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. And honestly, it was a good day for me. I was feeling great. I didn't take it in a negative way. I wasn't sad about it. I wasn't disappointed. I mean, if anything, I was pretty happy about it, I'd say, because, you know, it gave me an answer. Having the autism diagnosis could explain a lot of things for me, like why I act the way I do, why I feel the way I feel, why I'm not understanding certain things, and in the end just provide me with resources going forward so that I can get the help and the accommodations that I may or may not need going forward in life. So, for example, I now have a 504 plan at school with things such as the professors can't force me to make eye contact with them, which, I mean, I think that should be a given, but some of my professors really didn't understand that, so we had to write it down. Or things like, I don't do well in unstructured group work, so I should be provided with an alternative activity because I just work better alone. Or, using noise-canceling headphones when I'm testing to eliminate background noise. So, yeah, that's kind of been my journey so far, from growing up undiagnosed, getting diagnosed late on in life, and now being very openly autistic, being very vocal about it, being the best advocate for myself and for the autistic community that I can. I'm not ashamed of it. I love to talk about it. I love to provide education and resources on the subject for those who may be unaware. I know I myself was unaware of a lot of the things that I now know before my diagnosis. So yeah. Let me know if you have any questions, as always, and I'll see you later. Bye.